Well, I had the application open. I just didn't push the record button because it's been such a long time.
I know, it's been an interesting, couple of months of staggered recordings.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when I say a long time, it's been a long time since we've done it week after week after week.
I don't know of anything else I've got coming up over the next few weeks. I think we'll get to the year mark without any more staggered or oddities in recording schedule.
I can't think of anything that would prevent me from recording on our regular time. So, same.
I was looking over the notes. I kind of think we lead real quick with the sub-item that I mentioned because it kind of leads into the rest of it.
I have a little bit of I haven't. Yeah, that's kind of. I feel like that's a great place to start. But I had just the smallest bit of follow up to say that I don't have the follow up yet. I had mentioned on our last show that the Supreme Court had a lot of power and it wasn't initially founded that way, and they argued a case, I believe, and were able to garner more power for themselves. And I still haven't been able to track down exactly the source that I'm looking for to provide that. So I just wanted to give an update on that. That's all.
And to be fair, just because I've been out of town, I actually have not gone back and re-listened to know if there's anything else I should have followed up on either.
I don't think there is. I listened to this week's. I listened to the episode that came out yesterday. Today, actually this afternoon. So I don't recall anything that you needed to follow up on.
Yeah, I didn't remember anything that I stated I would follow up on, but overall we talked about so many different things that really could spur multiple conversations that
totally.
It's tough to keep track of what I was labeling or what I was thinking in my head as follow-up versus just potential next subjects.
I know there are times where I'll listen to it and I'll be like, I didn't think I needed to follow up on something. And I was like, oh, I actually want to follow up on that. So,
and then realistically, this is kind of follow up from a few episodes prior. I say it that way just because COVID has dominated our minds in general for a year and a half. So anytime we talk about it, it could be follow up.
No, that's true. That's true.
But
so
what I figured I would mention is so Jacob starts kindergarten next week, and we have meet the teacher this week. I think Thursday. I've realized that over the past week and a half, general concerns about COVID and variants and everything else have come back to the forefront and have been something that I've been thinking more and more about lately. And especially general wonder about what the school is doing to prevent spread and outbreak or different precautionary measures. And the fact that overall communication from the school is lacking at best. And then compounding that with general communication and understanding about what is actually being seen in younger populations with the newer variants. It's tough to get a feel for what's actually occurring. And so I linked an article, but the article itself was really more just to reference kind of a talking point. It's not so much the article itself that I want to go into. I actually reached out to both his pediatrician, the office, and a good friend of mine who's a pediatrician in a different region, and just said, all right, what are you actually seeing? Let's get past the national statistics and everything else. Just what are you seeing in your area? How infectious are the new variants, or what kind of rates of infection are you seeing affecting you in your practice? And what does that mean ramification-wise as far as severity? And I got two very different answers. Very similar on rate of infection, but very different on outcome. So locally, my question was in the younger populations, because Jacob is not old enough to even remotely be considered for vaccination yet. My question was, how often are they seeing cases in younger children result in hospitalization? And I didn't take it into any further breakdown, just that gives me a rough ballpark for severity. And the answer I got was not overly encouraging. The answer was that it's about half and half, actually, that they are seeing drastically more infections, and the outcomes are ranging from asymptomatic, as expected, to a significant uptick in hospitalizations in the younger age groups. The other region, so the friend of mine that's a pediatrician, they were seeing similar rates of infection, but they were not seeing an increase in hospitalizations at this point. So that's to be expected when you're talking about multiple variants and levels of vaccination and everything else. There's so many variables there. We could talk into or about those and around those quite a bit. But that's a fairly concerning thought with a child entering a new school system in an area that is very, I wouldn't say anti-vaccine necessarily, because I don't necessarily say that that's everybody's motivation, but definitely vaccine skeptical.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we should make a really clear distinction about anti-vaxxer is one thing, and there are vaccine skeptics, and that's a very different thing. The outcome is the same, that neither they make up the unvaccinated, but they have very different motivations and so forth. But it's something I think we'll talk about more.
Yeah, and that generally sets the stage for what's been a fairly prominent thought recently, and kind of leads into the different pieces that you linked and put together as an outline.
Yeah, I was definitely feeling this was definitely a source of stress for me for the past few weeks, because my children have been they did virtual learning all of last year, and it wasn't great. And if I'd known, even just halfway through the school year, we had the option of putting them back into the school, and decided against it because we were just But that's not an option this year. And in retrospect, I think they could have gone to school and they would have been fine, because everybody was wearing a mask. That was the entire school system was masked, or requiring they were requiring masks, and it turned out that masks are so effective, and it wasn't. Going back to school wasn't the shit show I thought it was going to be a year ago. But this year, there's not a mask mandate in place, at least not statewide. The school system my children are in had so much pressure from parents, including myself, that they have, as soon as it was sometime after the CDC recommended having masks, they were sort of waiting on the public health, Department of Public Health to also make that recommendation. But there's just so much parents from the pressure that the whole school system is now requiring masks. It's one of two school systems in the state requiring masks as of yesterday afternoon, which was Monday, August 2nd.
Which, just for, I guess not necessarily which, I haven't seen anything specific to the school system here where anything has been mandated or even recommended. But that also goes back to, there's just been so little communication that I think a lot of it is anxiety over not having a person sitting in front of me that I can ask pointed questions of, which should hopefully be resolved this week when we meet the teacher.
Yeah, I think, it's the whole point of having a public health, or one of the reasons we have a Department of Public Health is so that they can make a recommendation this way. And then somebody who's in charge of a school system can just follow that recommendation. And then they're not like the bad guy or whatever. It's like, we are following the guidelines of the Department of Public Health. They are the subject matter experts. We're going to do what they say. Take it up with them. And so, I mean, that's a good dynamic to have in place, as long as you have a responsible school system and a responsible Department of Public Health. We haven't had, we've had some questionable times recently, so it's just been, we certainly don't have the misinformation and the adversarial dynamic between the administration and the CDC and so forth anymore. That has gone away, but it still feels bad that there's not as much communication as we would hope to have. And certain things do take time, but it still doesn't feel good.
Well, and you also look at some of the efforts in other areas, and I'm going to specifically call out Florida and is it Louisiana, where the governors have very openly campaigned against mask mandates. I know Florida for sure.
I know Texas for sure.
Okay, so it may have been Florida.
I know Florida
Texas.
And Texas. I'm not 100% sure about Louisiana.
All right. Louisiana may be stuck in my head for a different reason. Florida, I know 100% has seen a massive surge in cases recently. I think you're right. I think it's Florida and Texas that are currently accounting for roughly 1/3 of new case counts.
Ooh. I know Louisiana has a high case now, and they've been in the news for that. So that I know that's why that is in your head. But the governor of Texas has been actively and vocally opposing mask mandates.
All right. So Florida and Texas are the ones I was thinking of for the mask mandates. Louisiana and Arkansas are the two that are struggling with case counts and just surges in infections. And I guess it should be mentioned that Missouri recently had a struggle with hospitalizations and a surge in caseload as well. But that has not been the most recent topic, so to speak, in the headlines.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I knew Arkansas was in the news recently for some a segment of the unvaccinated they're skeptical, and so
just
really interesting.
Quick case in point. I want to also mention Arkansas, based on geographic proximity to Missouri, is struggling with what would be some level of overflow from that outbreak as well. Or at least that's what the article that I read mentioned. So while there is certainly a significant population that is vaccine skeptical, I think that it's compounded by the levels of infection in the adjacent state.
Borders are imaginary. I mean, sometimes they follow actual rivers, but they're imaginary lines, and we made up laws that are bound to these imaginary lines. But people, you can freely move back and forth between states. So, as a child, I lived in a city that had the Tennessee-Virginia state line was right through the city, and there was the downtown had a lane in Virginia and a lane in Tennessee. So I'm aware it's very easy to move back and forth between states. It's very easy to live in a state that has, or live in a city that has different taxes. It was smart to live on the Tennessee side because there was no income tax, and it was smart to go shopping on the Virginia side because they had lower sales tax. Anyway,
yeah, the joys of gaming the systems.
Right. I mean, it's just like, nobody wants to live there now, but that city has been in decline since the 90s. But I digress. The topic, is that the vaccine's working great. Like the durability of the vaccine is holding up to exactly what was said at the end of last year, beginning of this year. This vaccine is fantastic. Even though we're having the largest spike in cases that for the whole pandemic, this vaccine is really holding up well. And Dr. Paul Offit had this nice little analogy that my friend Eller and I have, really taken really gotten pretty detailed with this analogy. But basically, if you think about your upper respiratory tract as a kitchen, the vaccine is a fire extinguisher, and the virus, a COVID, SARS-CoV-2 infection is a fire. So the fire starts, you get infected. It's not like this, I'm going to argue the opposite of what I've argued today, but it's not a breakthrough infection. This was expected. It's got a roughly 95% efficacy. There's some question about the efficacy with the Delta variant, but Moderna and Pfizer are, on the high end, they're still in the mid-90s for efficacy against that variant. The infection would be like a kitchen fire, and the vaccine is like a fire extinguisher. If you've gotten the vaccine, you've got a fire extinguisher, you put out the fire. Is there some amount of damage? Yes, but you didn't burn your whole house down. And I thought that was really insightful. I went on to say that you'd have to have 2 refrigerators in this kitchen to represent your lungs. And the sink represents your nose. And the water that comes from the faucet represents your snot. So we're all washing our hands with our snot. And somebody asked, my girlfriend asked me, well, what is the oven? I was like, well, obviously the oven is your throat. And that's because, when you cough, hot air comes out. So that's that.
So in general, I would say that the analogy works well. I think the big talking point is a little bit different from that, though. It's understanding what it means to be vaccinated from or against anything, because more often than not, people equate vaccine to, well, I'm not going to get whatever I am vaccinated from. And that's not accurate. This thing may still infect me, but I have the ability to fight it off without sustaining significant long-term damage.
Right. Our bodies have been, I don't know what the right metaphor here is, but our bodies are ready to fight the infection. Without the vaccine, your body is not ready to fight the infection. It will be a brand new virus to learn how to fight. And so some people's immune systems are better at that than others. And if the infection lasts long enough, it will kill you.
And the way that I've described it in the past is a little bit different. It's the vaccine provides a blueprint so that your body can recognize this thing for what it is and knows how to mount the proper offense against it. So if you think about it from a programmatic standpoint, it's like this is a pattern or an algorithm or whatever construct that you want to call it. This construct, if you see it, it is hazardous to you. This is the pattern or construct for what to create to block or counteract or attack or destroy it, just depending on what it is.
Right. I mean, pretty simply, it's just pattern matching. You get a thing, this is foreign, let's destroy it. Well, now that we've destroyed it, we know what it is. If we see anything else like it, we're going to destroy that too. I think that's the simplest version of that, but absolutely. It is preparing a defense system.
It's like kind of going back to the previous statement, you think about vaccines in general for like measles or mumps or, a number of the different smallpox, in any of the things that we've quote unquote eradicated. That doesn't mean that particular virus is completely gone and could never resurface. But it does mean that if it does resurface and you happen to have that pathogen enter your body, there's no real ramification because you are counteracting it already through what level of immunity the vaccine provides.
Right. I mean, there was, prior to this pandemic, there were a few measles outbreaks in California, and these were from families with children of families with anti-vaxxers, like proper anti-vaxxers. And it's kind of bizarre to hear about a measles outbreak. Like, I hadn't heard about that in my entire life until a few years ago. And it's because there was a number of enough children that were unvaccinated that the measles virus could become successful again in that area. So, but there are just so many people that are vaccinated against the measles that it was relatively contained. And at some point, if we can get enough people in the world vaccinated against SARS-CoV-2, the same thing. In the process, the virus is going to continue to mutate because that's what happens. That's the nature of the virus. And the nature of the virus tends toward mutating to a less and less virulent strain, much like we saw with H1N1. That doesn't mean it can't go the other way. And it doesn't mean that, like this Delta variant is... Some have said that the R0 value is increased, but there are also some virologists that are not ready to make that claim as well. So there's still much to be learned about the Delta variant, and there's probably going to be, there may or may not be something to learn about the Lambda variant and so forth. So
yeah, I think a good comparison here, even though I hesitate to mention it because it could be taken the wrong way, but the influenza virus is one that we know rapidly mutates and changes often. Same thing that we're seeing with SARS-CoV. Well, I assume it's still all classified SARS-CoV-19. We haven't changed that yet, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so SARS-CoV-2 and then however many variants. I mean, I think we had something like several dozen variants at the very beginning.
Right. And
like in the 30s or 40s.
Yeah. And so the big thing to remember is when you have a virus that is ever changing, for lack of better phrasing, even though all viruses mutate, this is one that mutates quickly. It's one that we are not well equipped naturally to combat. I fully expect this to be more like our general battle with influenza from the standpoint of requiring some level of maintenance going forward, at least for a while, if not perpetually. And
I think it'll be with... Oh, go ahead.
The only reason I wanted to draw the distinction and make that comparison is because we don't have a rapidly changing and mutating measles virus, as an example. You have, 3 different boosters for it, I think. Maybe it's 2. I think it's 3. Either way, like that particular vaccine and the way it works and what it's protecting against is different because it's a different type of virus. And so that's the only reason I'm wanting to even mention the comparison, but I hesitate so much mentioning a comparison to influenza because this is so much worse than influenza.
So it's, I was having this conversation today, and it's like, how many of the colds, what we would call a common cold, were just as virulent or dangerous as SARS-CoV-2? And maybe some of them were hundreds of thousands of years ago, but human civilization, which was much different, and we didn't have all of the connections, and first of all, the population was much smaller, and we didn't have a way to travel all over the world the way that we do now, and the way we did even 100 years ago. The reason why the H1N1 pandemic was, or one of the contributing factors to the H1N1 pandemic, was that there were so many people coming, so many American soldiers coming back from Europe to the United States because of the war, and they brought a lot of, a lot of them brought the virus over here with them, and so that was a significant contributing factor to the 1918 pandemic. That is to say, I think we'll always have. I don't think this is ever going away. This will always be a thing. I don't think it will be it won't be of pandemic proportions. It won't be the scary virus that it is today. It won't, or the problematic virus that it is today. I would expect 100 years from now, because these vaccines are so effective, that there will be, you get a COVID vaccine like you get a measles vaccine, and that'll be it. I don't think we'll think much more. I mean, I don't think society will think much more of it than what we're experiencing now with the flu vaccine. And again, it's terrible to draw that comparison, but one day it might be an apt comparison. But that day is not today.
Yeah.
I think.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the thing that's been really disheartening to see is that people that I would have expected to be, or people that support vaccination, are now like, oh, all these people are getting quote unquote breakthrough infections, and now do we need an entirely new vaccine? I was like, no, you don't need an entirely new vaccine. This one is phenomenal. Like, this is, could it be 100%? Could it be better? Yeah, but that's not the world. We don't live in a world where we get, certain absolutes like this. People still experience infections from bubonic plague. Really easy to treat with the right antibiotics, but it still happens. I think that bacteria is fairly prevalent among prairie dogs of all animals. But people in the Midwest have been infected with bubonic plague, and you don't hear anything about it because it's treatable. So we have a great vaccine. We just need to get folks vaccinated. And there's a lot of reasons why they're not.
Before we delve into that piece, I want to step back real quick. The concept of a breakthrough infection. It's dominated the news lately for good reason. But if you really dig into all of the different things that have been reported, what does that actually mean? And what I have found so far is that, all right, if you're vaccinated, you contract COVID, you are not completely asymptomatic, so you exhibit some level of symptoms. So far, those have been generally mild, with extremely rare cases of it being not mild. And with at least the Delta variant, I don't think there's enough data on the Lambda variant yet, but at least with the Delta variant, what has been more concerning is that vaccinated individuals, whether symptomatic or not, are able to continue to spread the virus.
Right. But they were saying that at the beginning of the year, before the vaccine came out, or as the vaccine was coming out. This was expected behavior.
Well, I don't know that I caught that up front. I think it was an unanswered question. And
it was an unanswered question. You're right. It was an unanswered question, but they said, so I guess you could say it was not unexpected that you could shed the virus.
Right. That's more what I understood, is that at this point we don't know. We think that there may be at least a reduction in transmission, but we can't answer that question because we don't have the data. Well,
if you get an infection and you can fight the infection off faster, that is to say, then you will be contagious for a shorter amount of period of time.
Right.
So in that regard, the vaccine is helpful in that way.
And
Also,
let's emphasize real quick as well that with everything that we know, whether you're symptomatic or not, you can be contagious for a short period of time.
absolutely.
Like that's not limited to COVID.
Right. That's how diseases, or that's how viruses spread.
Right.
We are their vectors. They, they would not be successful viruses if they were if the contagion or the contagious period were sometime. They wouldn't be as successful if the contagious period happened after symptoms came about, because when you feel bad, you stay at home in bed.
Yeah, the main point that I wanted to emphasize is the commonality with something that people are looking at as novel and new, and everything else that we've ever known prior to it. It's one of those things that seems like it leads to skepticism or some resistance to pursue vaccination, seems to be revolving around treating COVID as this anomaly. And that's kind of what I want to make sure is emphasized, is that it's not. It's an anomaly from the standpoint of rate of infection and our lack of preparedness. And by preparedness, I just mean genetic predisposition to being able to fight it.
Yeah.
But it is not different from anything else that we have known previously from the standpoint of virology and understanding the way pathogens find their way into hosts.
Right. I remember maybe like April, May of 2020 thinking, how many viruses jumped from species to human, from some species to a human, let's say specifically from a bat to a human, and just weren't successful. And I kept thinking this probably happened so many times, and this is like, whatever the odds of this virus occurring naturally, if we knew all the times that a virus has jumped from some animal and was unsuccessful, we'd probably say these are actually fits right in with the odds. And then I came across this article in the Atlantic, and it just eloquently and appropriately supported that position and had data to go with it. And I was just like, I felt so validated when that happened, or when I read that article. I have to go back and find it, but
off the top of your head, do you remember the scientific term for jumping from animal to human?
I don't
either. I know it's not zoological, but there is something with zoology as the root of the term, and I could not remember it for the life of me in a conversation that I was having last week. That will be something that I will take it upon myself to follow up on. Yeah.
Ooh, maybe I can send you a recording with inline follow-up.
Maybe.
The term for when a virus jumps from one species to another is zoonotic spillover.
But
so,
go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to say that it's as much as people are needing to be scared about something, or are legitimately scared about something. I felt it was an uncharitable thing to say at first. We're probably going to be okay. It would just be really helpful if everybody did what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, and did you see any of the president's remarks? I don't know if it was earlier today or if it was yesterday, but basically pointedly spoken toward the governors of Florida and Texas.
Mm-hmm. What did he say? I didn't see his remarks.
The comment was basically, look, if you're not going to do the right thing, at least get out of the way. And this is paraphrased because he said it very bluntly, but I don't have the quote in front of me to read it verbatim, so I'm going to claim it being paraphrased just out of respect for proper quotation. But it was very much a, look, we need you to do the right thing. And this was in reference to, attempting to curb the spread of COVID in these outbreak areas. If you're not going to push for vaccination and you're not going to push for distancing and mask mandates, if nothing else, if you're not going to be helpful, just get out of the way and let those who are wanting to do the right thing do the right thing.
Well, that is a stark difference from what we had a year ago.
If some governors aren't willing to do the right thing to beat this pandemic, then they should allow businesses and universities who want to do the right thing to be able to do it. I say to these governors, please help. But if you aren't going to help, at least get out of the way of the people who are trying to do the right thing. Use your power to save lives.
Yeah, no doubt. We could go into a whole episode about why I like Biden on some things and dislike him on others. In general, it has been so refreshing to have a voice of reason and a voice of actual, what I would consider true leadership in that position.
Yeah. It's certainly a breath of fresh air. It's one less thing to have to fight and worry about.
And on top of that, did you see closer to home, Governor Ivey's remarks? I think it was a week or so ago, where basically it's time to blame the unvaccinated,
Yes,
very directly stating it.
Yes, yeah.
I was quite surprised.
I was incredibly critical of her, and I had to go back and say I'm wrongly so, because I thought she should have pushed harder for certain mandates, but if she had, people would have probably pushed back even harder than they did. I know that I really appreciated what the governor of Kentucky did, and the people of Kentucky pushed back against him harder than they might have if he hadn't been as progressive as he was regarding this. So it doesn't feel good to say, even though you didn't go far enough, that was, people around me were saying she's doing the best she can with what she has. And I don't like the way that feels, but she had to be strategic, and she was. I don't even want to say she had to play politics. I think she was just being strategic. And ultimately, that was probably a better outcome than if she had tried to push for safer regulations and mandates.
Yeah, I think this illustrates a good, just general philosophical point. Why does it feel bad? It feels bad because we can very clearly analyze and see X being the right thing to do, the literal right, justifiable thing to do.
The objectively right thing to do.
Right. And we can't get to X because of these other obstructions.
Right. There are a lot of reasons. Like I asked somebody, oh, sorry.
Well, and I was just going to say that how many people do you think really view the world in that way? Like how many people are able to objectively look at a situation and say, these steps get me to here, which means these steps are the right things to pursue, and these steps don't compromise whatever life philosophies you want to ascribe to. And I'm trying to be very generic because that's so all-encompassing. But how many people view it through an objective enough lens to say this is the right thing for me and those around me? I struggle to think that that's more than 10 to 15% of the population.
Yeah. It's a much lower percentage of the population than you would expect. And that's okay if we didn't have all of these other challenges. Like I was talking to somebody today about the vaccine and whether or not they were vaccinated. And it was somebody that I really care about and hope that, I view getting the vaccine as the way to safeguard yourself and to safeguard your family. And I asked him, I was like, hey, have you gotten vaccinated? And we disagree on a lot of things. And his response to me was, that's my personal information. So I knew immediately what the answer to that question was. And I said, I just want to know that you're okay. And you can tell me what it is that you've done, regardless of how I conduct myself on social media. I really do care. And he had a sense of, he was concerned that I was going to disparage him or belittle him because he thinks differently than me. And I told him, I was like, no, I can be open-minded. Like, if I'm not open-minded, then how can I communicate to you what it is that I think? And if I am not genuinely listening to you, why would I expect you to do the same to me? And so, we kept talking, and he asked me, why do you think people are not getting vaccinated? And I said that I think there are a lot of reasons, and there's an obvious and warranted level of mistrust for the government, big pharma, doctors, the scientific community at large, and maybe some more relevant entities. And we've also fulfilled our society. We have created social barriers and societal failures that have led to a much larger portion of the population that don't want to get the vaccine, much larger than I expected. And we haven't done a good job of educating and explaining what's different. It's there's still a mentality of like, listen to what we say, here's what the data says. And it's like, well, we need a little more than the data, because it's more than just the problem. Go ahead.
Can I jump in and
yeah,
pull something here? So there are a number of reasons that someone could be skeptical of the vaccine. I think we can go into that in more detail in a moment. The piece that I want to kind of pull out and point to is a little more abstract, but also a little more direct. It's the communication around understanding scientific methodology has been a failure. Like, just across the board, we have not done a good job of conveying this is what it means to be a part of, or to understand the progression from discovery to understanding of X. In this case, X being COVID.
right.
The big problem is that most people, and I say that kind of loosely because I have nothing to back it up. It's just anecdotally through conversations. I don't feel like most people understand on a fundamental level the progression of the scientific method as a whole. The underlying kind of resistance to, or maybe a better way to kind of paraphrase it, the underlying mistrust or misunderstanding of science revolves around the fact that the messaging changes often without a clear understanding of why it changes.
Yeah, the reason why there's been a failure to communicate or part of the reason why there's a failure to communicate is that science education has been de-emphasized over the past 50 or more years. It's or at least in the last 50 years, it's definitely been de-emphasized. And coupled with that, I mentioned there's been a warranted lack of trust for the scientific community. So
real quick, I want to interject that I don't think it's a lack of distrust for the scientific community as a whole specifically. I think it's a lack of distrust for those in a position of authority, which unfortunately includes the scientific community.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there is a healthy and warranted level of mistrust for the scientific community because they conducted experiments that they should not have conducted. They, I can't remember. There were breakthrough scientific discoveries over the immortal cells of Henrietta Lacks, but what they did to that woman was unconscionable. So it's not entirely just authority. I mean, it certainly fits in with the narrative, but there's also that people are correctly remembering what has happened historically with vaccines and are incorrectly applying that knowledge to our current affairs, our current events. So there's that as well, and that I feel like that's probably pretty powerful because there is a level of rightness to that. The polio vaccine, even though it made people sick, it was still better than not having the vaccine, but there was a better vaccine that came along, and the first polio vaccine was abandoned. I mean, I had that thought. I remember thinking a year ago, yeah, when the vaccine comes out, I'm going to get it, but I kind of don't mind being at the end of the line, the last one of the last folks to get it. With that in mind.
That was certainly a thought that I had as well. I remember doing a lot of research on what it even means to be a mRNA vaccine, because the technology is relatively new, or relatively in the grand scheme of things. The technology itself has actually been around for a while. It's just that it hasn't been applied until recently.
It's been too expensive. It was developed in the 80s.
And so there was a lot of, in my mind, trying to decide, okay, I agree that the vaccine is the route to go. There was never any doubt in my mind that would be an appropriate path to pursue and should be the path to pursue. But when I first started hearing about the potential vaccine, I was a bit more skeptical. I was thinking, maybe I let a few 100,000 or so people go first. Like, let's see what this actually means. And then as I read more, as I learned more, as I just watched events unfolding, it's like, no, as soon as I possibly can, I'm ready. Yeah. Like, give it to me now. I would even do an alpha or beta trial. I don't care. Just, I get it. I understand it. Well, let's rephrase. I get the idea and I understand the concept. I know what you're going for. I have no concerns about it. Like, just give it to me. How fast can I get it? And that is remarkably different from the way most people approach it. And it's not that it's a unique level of understanding. It's that I took the time to read in detail everything I possibly could to understand what it means, because I wasn't being given an easy to digest understanding of it from those people in a position to do so. Like, what I was given was, get the vaccine, it's X percentage, efficient, et cetera, et cetera. Nothing explained to me why I should trust something that has not gone through the multiple levels of regulatory approval to be quote unquote certified or blessed or whatever terminology it officially is, FDA approved. Like, I took it upon myself to learn about it.
I'm the same. I took it upon
majority
myself.
of people do not.
No, they don't. And we have avenues to communicate that information better than we ever have in all of human history. I mean, 30 years ago, we had the television. And prior to that, we had the radio. And now there's so many ways to get this information out, and so many reliable ways to do that. But it's not happening. And that's certainly a whole other problem. But there was, I had to go find virologists talking about this and about vaccines to know why this vaccine would be different from the first polio vaccine. I had to go and find out why are Moderna and Pfizer so different. Well, they're not. They're delivering the exact same thing in just different ways. The part that the delivery method is different. So, yeah, I don't know a lot of people that are gonna go listen to a podcast where 6 to 8 virologists talk for a couple hours every week about SARS-CoV-2. It's unless you're there and in there, or you're just a super nerd, it's just not most people. But I think there's a huge gap between folks that know what they're talking about and write papers that are peer reviewed, that have hard data in it. And there are the rest of us that probably aren't going to have much success reading that, because if you read one article, that's great, but you have to know where it fits in with the rest of the other articles and where it fits in with that field. So that makes it even more difficult to understand or communicate that information to.
So I think that's a good lead into, I think, the big question, right? Which is, we've mentioned there are plenty of reasons to be skeptical of vaccines. There are plenty of reasons that people may have for waiting or wanting to get more information. In a nutshell, I think we have really 3 categories of individuals. You have those who intend to seek it out on their, well, actually, I'm going to revise that already. We have 4 categories. You have the early adopters, those who seek out the information on their own, make up their decision from a relatively informed standpoint, and that information being what they have sought out and gathered and understood for application in their life, right?
Right, and how much information one needs may vary person to person.
Correct. And then the reason I immediately revised it is because there's a following subset of the population that I would say are willing to accept what someone in a position of authority has informed them of. And I don't mean that in a negative way, even though I could certainly take it in a negative way.
We could boil all of our information gathering down to that, because at some point somebody with that, yeah.
Yeah, so the idea is that you have the initial group that probably encapsulates somewhere between 10 to 20% of the population that is willing to really invest energy and time in figuring out what it means and going for it. And then you have a group behind that is more, if you tell me this is the right thing to do, I'm willing to accept it based on whatever guidance, or maybe it's word of mouth from that initial group. Maybe it's friends, family. Maybe it's specifically just CDC guidance. Whatever whatever it is in that group that they look to for guidance in general, that's the group that was willing to accept the vaccine without doing in-depth research and without having to see plenty of people getting it first, right? So you've got those who seek it out, those who just kind of accept, yes, okay, you're telling me this is safe and effective, and I understand that, and that's all I need to know. I'll go for it. And then you've got the third group, who would be what I consider the vaccine skeptical. They're the ones who are looking at the first two groups and saying, okay, I understand the idea, but I want to see that everything's okay for whatever reason, right? And then you have a final group who is vaccine resistant. And I say it that way because that viewpoint can include those who are just anti-vaccine, period. But it can also include those who, I'm not going to seek it out. I get it. I've kind of watched the information, but until you tell me I have to go get it, I'm not going to do it.
That fits that mold. There's a lot of people in that mold, and it's for a lot of things, not just the vaccine.
Right. So if you paid attention, you also have recognized this fits into the general idea of how you achieve that tipping point into a market for success as well. You have your initial group, your 20 to 30% that you need to kind of adopt it and become mainstream, and then you have your group that rides the wave once they see that this has become something mainstream and can accept it and understand it. And then you have your tail end group that's just diehard, whatever their mentality or decision-making process involves, has nothing to do with anybody else.
Yeah. Those are the people that buy an iPhone a month before the new iPhone comes out.
No, those are the people who buy the last remaining Nokia flip phone that they can get because they don't want to go to the iPhone because it doesn't have a physical keyboard.
Right.
But the other piece of that, because you could subdivide those a little bit further. I don't want to be overly generic, because you could certainly make that last category for vaccine resistance into those who just are resistant to doing anything without it being mandated, and those who are just 100% anti anything within whatever category. But the reason I kind of wanted to break it up into those is there's a huge segment that falls somewhere between going and seeking out information and making an informed decision for whatever they believe, and that latter group, that makes up the majority of the population in the middle there. That range includes those who are skeptical of the vaccine or skeptical of the seriousness of the virus, or skeptical of authority, or whatever the particular details are, which leads to kind of the question I want to pose, which is, what do you actually think is driving that skepticism most? Is it skepticism from a scientific viewpoint of the vaccine, or is it skepticism born from the general just miscommunication or misunderstanding of communication that we've seen for a prolonged period of time, or something else, or just general skepticism as a whole, not even focused on a specific topic?
It's hard to know. And, part of me wants to say it doesn't matter. We should fix all of these problems regardless of them. Or, where the skepticism, where the source of the skepticism is. And I'm fairly confident that you could make an argument that would make me change my mind because, you do that.
That's such a wide-reaching thing.
I know. I've left myself wide open for that. So, but at the end of the day, we should solve all of these. We should make strides to solve these problems. But if you did know where the largest source of skepticism came from, that's probably the problem you would tackle first if you want to solve the problem. But I don't know what the source of the problem is. Like, there's a lot of different reasons.
I like that answer. I have a theory, which is relatively new. So my original thought was that people were just skeptical of the virus, or not the virus, the vaccine. And then I thought, well, maybe it's not so much skepticism surrounding the vaccine and its effects. Maybe it's more skepticism surrounding the severity of the virus because of how many different things we've heard. I don't think it's either one of those things. I think the level of skepticism we're seeing is born from the lack of unified communication across the board for multiple years.
Yes, that makes sense.
The issue that we're facing is that you can go talk to any one person. Their source of truth is not the same as the next person you talk to, and the next person, and the next person, et cetera, et cetera. And that's fine. You don't have to share a source of truth to understand what's going on, in the world around you. But there should be a singular source of truth for something that is rooted in scientific fact. Because we have been so conditioned to question what we're being told from a singular source, unless multiple sources really step up and reiterate the same messaging and do it in the same general way, it seems like there's conflicting messaging from each source. And so we've reached a point where this skepticism of what I'm being told is true and what I may find to be true kind of weaves in and out of this narrative that you've actually provided to me. I don't have a way to look at any singular source as a factual, truthful source, which that I think is the overall issue that we have to combat when it comes to something like this, which is to say, in a nutshell, skepticism of scientific fact really is something that we should not be focused on. Skepticism of the narrative that we are being told is something that is absolutely justifiable. How do you distinguish between the two?
I was just thinking, it's like, that's the hard part. Some people cannot distinguish between the two.
Right. And I think this actually goes back to something that I mentioned before, is it requires a level of effort on the part of the average person. You cannot just consume a news source or whatever. Let's even take the word news out of it. You cannot just consume content from a source. You have to be willing to look at it and corroborate it. And if you're not willing to put in that level of effort, you're going to remain skeptical of everything.
Yeah. And that's not a great way to live. It's not great for them. It's not great for us, as we're seeing right now.
Flip side of it, you can also just listen to this podcast for your source of truth. Don't do that.
Sometimes, sometimes someone would say, well, I'll say a thing and they're like, question it. I'm like, don't forget, I'm the arbiter of all truth and reality. So, but
everything that we say will be true from our point of view. We can at least guarantee that.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. You qualify something enough, it's true. I wanted to end with the tweet that I put a link in our notes with, because I think it's sort of apt, and this is in the particular comment. It says anti-vaxxers, but really this is anyone, whether you're anti-vaxxer or vaccine skeptic. These are the people that are fitting in. This is the group that, this is a whole group of people, and we can lump them all in together. Anyone who doesn't have the unvaccinated, this fits the unvaccinated, whether or not you are, medically not able to get the vaccine, anti-vaxxer, or vaccine skeptical. And that is because, I think I'm qualifying this quote, but I think, anti-vaxxer is put in the quote because of the nature of the quote. And it was from something George Takei shared and attributed to being overheard. And that is the irony of anti-vaxxers saying that they don't want to be a part of an experiment without realizing they are now the control group. I'm going to say that again because I fucked up the delivery.
Well, and before you say it again, because I think reiterating the quote as an ending is apt, but I want to add in that a control group, or what it is that a control group is. Like, let's explain the idea of an experiment real quick. So you have your control group, and you can have X number of what's the term? I'm blanking on it. Well, you have your control group where you do nothing, or you provide a placebo. Basically, you have your group that is going about their day without any change from your standpoint. And then you have your experimental groups where you could have 1 or 10, like it all depends on the scope of the experiment, where you modify a singular variable. And so your control group is what you measure against.
Yeah, the control group is the group that goes through the same set of tests with no variable.
Right.
So, I think I realized why I didn't say it right the first time, and that is that it's not written well. But the irony of anti-vaxxers saying they don't want to be a part of an experiment is that they don't realize they're already now the control group. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.